Hey guys, welcome back to the IGM channel. I'm Woodcraft CZ, and today we're going to my workshop. We're going to build an end grain chopping board, this one right here, and we're going to do so using tools that are all available at IGM. I'm going to show you the process of using these tools and also show you some tips and tricks along the way. So without further ado, let's head over there. So here we have a selection of 3 types of wood. We have Canadian maple, American cherry and European walnut. I'm taking the stock and we're going to square it, and to do so I'm putting it on a flat reference board and we're putting shims under the wood and using hot glue to secure it into place. This will now be ready to take over to the planer. Next I'm switching on my dust collection. It's the P-Flux 3 from Laguna. Now the planer is a PS33 from IGM. I'm just setting the height and locking it into place with the lever on the side. So now just running the board through. I love this planer because of its helical head. It just makes the cut buttery smooth. Such a lovely finish. So now that one side is planed, we remove it from the reference board, checking for level, and then we're going to thickness the other side. But before that, we need to process the rest of the wood. You can see I'm just marking the live edge out and cutting it on my bandsaw. This is the Laguna 18BX and it's a beast of a machine. It gets the job done and done well. You can see I'm just using the chalk line I marked out earlier to get a rough guide on how to cut the live edge off so it gives a fairly straight edge. As you can see, now the wood has a straight edge on it. Now the next part I could have done with a jointer, which I now have. I actually own the Jet 410HH, but at this instance I didn't own it. So I'm using a hand plane to get a right angle on the edge of the wood. Takes a bit of practice, but once you know how to do it, it's easy enough. Now I'm going to take the wood over to the table saw. I have the Laguna Fusion 3 and I'll be using my rip cut blade from CMT to cut the other side of the edge so it gives a parallel straight edge. And there you have it. All the wood is processed on one side and ready to go to the planer to have the other face planed. You can see I'm just lowering it again to the right thickness and passing the wood stock through the planer. Once again, this is the IGM planer, the PS33 with helical head. At the time of filming, this was by far my favourite planer I've had. It has a great feature and an easy to read depth guide. It tells you how much material it's taking off the stock in red. Now back to the Fusion 3 to cut the wood into strips. I'm still using my CMT ripping blade and I'm just raising it to height. I'm cutting the wood into 40mm strips. Here, I'm just cutting through the Canadian maple. What's great about these CMT blades is that they have carbide teeth that can be resharpened. So if you keep your blade sharp, you'll have effortless cuts all the time. So here we have it. All the wood's been processed, cut into strips, and ready for the glue up. I'm just going through each piece of wood, making sure everything's okay and it's ready to be glued. I'm also getting a feel for how I want to arrange the wood. So here I'm laying out the Corpus clamp from IGM. These clamps are great. They have a very strong pressure and they have levers that can bend to a 90-degree angle, which provides more leverage when turning. So now the wood goes into the clamps and we're getting a feel for how we want to arrange it. This is the first glue up. So now that the wood is in the clamps, I'm just turning them to the side by 90 degrees so the edges are facing up. This allows me to spread the glue evenly across all the edges. Okay, so that's all the wood done. I'm using Titebond 3 for this glue because number 1, it's food safe, and number 2, it's a premium product. It really works well and it's never failed me. So I'm just applying it to each strip. And now just using a silicone brush to spread the glue. This makes application of the glue far easier. Now I turn the wood back 90 degrees so it's in its original position and start pressing each strip against each other so the edges are making contact with the side that hasn't got glue to the side that has got glue. I prefer to use more glue than needed than not to use enough glue and have problems later down the line. Now all the glue has been applied, it's time to apply pressure with the clamps. I'm just tapping any pieces of wood that are raising up and just getting it flush to the clamp spines. As they say, you can never have too many clamps. Here's a great example of me turning the handles 90 degrees to apply more pressure. Okay, so now having left this overnight, 24 hours, it's time to remove the clamps and see what we have. Looks like the start to a well-glued chopping board. So I'm just removing it, and as you can see, the painter's tape did its job, and I'm going to use a chisel. This you can buy from IGM, just to remove the glue beads. Next, we're going back to the reference plate and using hot glue to fix it, ready for the planer. Here I'm just adjusting the height and running it through the planer. Once again, this is the IGM PS33. Once I'm happy with the top side, I'm going to take it off and run the other side along the bed of the planer. And here you have it. Here's the first stage complete. Now back to the Laguna Fusion 3. You can see I'm changing the blade from the ripping cut to the cross cut. Now we're doing this because we're about to cut the glued strips into further sections, and this will require a cross cut blade, as it will provide a cleaner cut due to less tear out. This blade has 80 teeth, and you can see the Laguna Fusion 3 makes it an easy job to change blades. So now the blade's on, I'm just checking for square. Everything looks good, and the throat plate goes back on. Now just to tighten it down, and we're good to go. I'm putting my crosscut sled on, and this allows me to set the depth of the strips. But first, I've got to take the edge off, and once that's done, we can start cutting strips. Okay, so we're back to the worktop. I have the clamps set up, and I'm using painter's tape again to prevent the glue going onto the clamps. So now just applying the glue, the same process as before, just with the cross-cut pieces, with the addition of 2 pieces of wood on the top and the bottom, just so it stays aligned. Once again with the mallet, just making sure everything lays flat, and we're ready to let it cure. Okay, so now that we've left it 24 hours, it's now fully cured and time to remove from the clamps. What you can see, I stuck some sellotape on so the glue wouldn't stick to the 2 pieces of wood, keeping the board straight. The ergonomic handles on the clamps makes it an easy job to loosen. Okay, so now we need to get the boards ready for the drum sander. We're going to use a similar technique where we did with the planer and put it on a flat reference board. This time, however, we're going to use double-sided tape to secure the boards onto this reference board. Now that we have it secure, I'm just going to use a pencil to do a faint line on the top so I can see what gets sanded as it passes through the drum sander. We're just giving the cylinder of the drum sander a clean using a rubber stock. You can get this at IGM. This is the Laguna Supermax 1632 drum sander. It has a capacity of 16 to 32 inches. As you can see, it's taking light passes and removing the pencil lines. Once they're completely gone, I know this side is done, but there's still some left, so a couple more passes. What I like about this drum sander is it has IntelliSense. If it feels the belt is driving too fast, it will slow it down accordingly. So now that side's done, we have a good reference point to do the other side, once again with the pencil to see how it sands down. So now the board is looking great, feeling great, and ready for the next stage. I'm back at the Laguna Fusion 3 and I'm just taking the edges off. A little tip is if the board is too long for the mitre gauge to sit comfortably on the table, I turn it round so that the handle leads first. So at this point we go over to the IGM studios where I use the router table and a 22-degree bit to put a bevel on the board. All the bits that I use are available at IGM and are of very high quality. You can see the bearing just taking reference on the edge of the board while the blade does the job. I do this stage in passes to avoid any tear out. So once this stage is done, I'll increase the height of the bit to take a second pass, as you can see here. So we take a little bit more off and leave a more pronounced bevel. I like the 22-degree bevel because it's not your typical 45. It offers a very pleasing aesthetic. So now we're going to do the top, but not a bevel this time, but a nice round over. So once again, we do it in passes. The first stage takes a part of the material off, and then we do a finishing pass. Here you can see how the bevel and the round over complement each other to offer a really nice look. Now for the handles. What I do, I set a stop mark on either side of the fence so I know where to register the board and how big the handle will be. Once again, I take small passes each time going further and further into the board until I register with the fence. That will set the depth of the handle. The distance you set the stop blocks will determine how wide the handle is. Okay, so now for the job that everybody loves, sanding. We're starting off with 80 grit on this Festool orbital sander and we're taking gentle passes. You can see I've applied the pencil technique once again on the board so I can see what parts I've sanded and what parts need to be sanded further. Okay, so now I'm happy with the 80 grit, time to move up to 120 and it's pretty much the same process again. Apply the pencil line, gentle sanding until the pencil line disappears, and then the board is ready for the final stage. The final stage involves me spraying some water onto the open grain. This will raise it, so then once it's dry, all the grain is standing upright, leaving you the ability to sand it once again in your final grit. In this case, I believe it's 360. Okay, so we've done it to both sides, and now it's time for the final sanding. This will leave a lovely smooth finish on your board. Okay, so now we're using the IGM T-square to mark out the holes where we want to attach the feet. I have a lovely set of brass feet, so I'm drilling the pilot holes and then gently screwing in the feet. And now time for the best bit, applying the oil. Make sure you use a food safe finish on the chopping boards because it's going to be in contact with food. So there you have it guys, this beautiful end grain chopping board made in my workshop and finished here at IGM. I hope you guys have liked it and have learned something from this video. A lot of the machines featured are available here at IGM, so if you want to purchase any or check them out, make sure you check the link in the description below, and guys, I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy and happy woodworking.